Effective debt management and crisis prevention, including debt transparency and responsible borrowing and lending, are key, while lowering borrowing costs and expanding fiscal space is essential for sustainable development. Signals a renewed, if not hard-won, commitment to multilateralism and equitable development. I welcome its emphasis on national ownership and sovereignty. For those of us from Africa, Africa's development is first, our foremost responsibility. We approach it with purpose and determination. Yet, strong global partnerships remain essential to our collective success. Calls for greater flexibility in ODA are steps in the right direction. I am encouraged by the recognition of trade and industrialization as drivers of structural transformation. No country has achieved lasting prosperity without manufacturing and export diversification. Africa is ready, poised, and prepared to become the next frontier of global production and innovation. I also welcome the focus on debt, liquidity, and the cost of capital. There is now consensus on the need for a development-oriented sovereign debt architecture, where public debt is an instrument for development, not a trap for distress. Additionally, effective debt management and crisis prevention, including debt transparency and responsible borrowing and lending, are key, while lowering borrowing costs and expanding fiscal space is essential for sustainable development. It is imperative to have debt sustainability and credit assessments that are accurate, objective, and long-term oriented. The independent expert review on debt, nature, and climate, Kenya co-led with Colombia, France, and Germany, exemplifies meaningful partnership for inclusive and sustainable growth. The outcome document also supports the global financing safety net, emphasizing governance reform at the IMF and mechanisms to facilitate easier access to precautionary instruments, lower lending rates, and better use of SDRs. The inclusion of SDRs rechanneling, support for capital adequacy framework, and efforts to incorporate multidimensional vulnerability into financial access signals real progress. What was once radical is now becoming mainstream. We finally have a consensus, ladies and gentlemen, on reforming the international financial architecture. This outcome document now calls for strengthening global economic governance by enhancing the voice and representation of developing countries in international financial institutions. Let us be clear. Without affordable capital and open markets, progress will stall. High debt premiums cannot be fixed by technical adjustments alone. Credit rating agencies also need to change their understanding of African economies. The Africa Credit Rating Agency is a crucial step in gaining a better understanding of Africa. Africa's role is critical to the global climate agenda, but we cannot deliver if our goods, services, and carbon credits are excluded from the global markets or if entire value chains are blocked. We must design trade rules and pricing systems that reward green production and accelerate decarbonization. Africa must be part of that solution, transforming green premiums into green discounts. While I respect the document structure, from domestic to global resources, let us not confuse form with priority. Public international finance remains indispensable. Africa is not asking for favors. We are asking for fairness, partnership, and investment. I urge the United States of America to reconsider its position and call on other member states with reservations on parts of this consensus to fully support the outcome document. The world's and Africa's futures are inseparable. Together, let us walk this path with honesty, urgency, and resolve. Kenya certainly will, and I thank you. For example, a matter that was ably canvassed by President Lorenzo about health. It is true, there is a relationship between poverty and conflict. There is a relationship between health and development. And as a result, it's become increasingly clear to us that even in the context where global resources, global fund resources, Gavi resources are going down, we must step up domestically mobilized resources to fill the gap. This is what we have done in Kenya, for example, so that we're not just discussing about reform of the international global financial architecture. We are also discussing reform of our own domestic raising interventions so that we have resources that is available at the domestic level. Just allow me just to say this, because it's important to contextualize where we are. For example, in Kenya, even when global resources were dwindling, we stepped in with domestic raising resources. We changed the infrastructure for raising health insurance from where we had 0 point something percent and the poor were paying 10%. We agreed on a standard 2.75% for everybody to pay. What has happened? We have raised $1 billion, money that we didn't have, and we have raised it domestic, using domestic resources. So some of the interventions can be sorted out by looking at domestic raising interventions that are local in its nature. Let me also say this. We've also leveraged on the private sector to provide help in Kenya. We worked with manufacturers that were buying from, we were buying from them equipment for our hospitals. We decided to change it on the other side. We decided to create an investment out of equipment. Now manufacturers are investing. We have now a leasing program, a fee-for-service program, where manufacturers, where we were buying a CT scan or an MRI for our hospitals, today they bring the MRI to the hospital, they bring the CT scan to the hospital, and we pay for service. For every service we get, we pay for it. We don't have to pay for the equipment anymore. So we have changed. Instead of us investing in buying equipment, manufacturers have seen an investment opportunity for them to put equipment in our hospitals, and it comes out as a win-win. So the private sector and the public sector are collaborating to deliver on public interventions. As a result, we have mobilized close to another $1.5 billion from the private sector to fund our health delivery mechanism. So there is what can be done globally, and we are all in for making sure that there is proper interventions in making sure the international financial architecture have proper representation and voice from our continent, but also we will step up as countries on local solutions, because we cannot wholly depend on external solutions to meet the challenges that face us, whether they are financial or they are public in nature. So this is and this is why the 4P also talks about country-led ownership of priorities and interventions.
So I think we are well on course on this, and I'm very clear that we are headed in the right direction, and that is why we have 73 countries who have joined us, because we are not discussing narratives, we are not discussing pointing fingers. This is not about south or north, this is about solutions.